Hello and welcome to the Crystal Palace podcast. I'm Alfonso Greenbrook and today for 47 I'll be looking at a result against Burnley by bringing my match review, player rankings and my man of match. As well as this, I'm also going to bring you an exclusive interview with Sam Allardyce and Patrick Van Aanholt after the game, so let's begin. Palace's wait to clinch Premier League safety would go on a little longer after Burnley picked up their first away win of the season at Selhurst Park. Goals 5 minutes from the start and end from Ashley Barnes and Andre Gray clinched a massive win for the visitors, who leapfrogged the Eagles in the table, leaving Sam Allardyce's men 7 points clear of the relegation zone with 3 games to go. Despite having much less time to recover for this game than the Clarets, Palace were the much better side early on, and after a flurry of corners they had their first sight on goal. Christian Benteke cut inside and let fly with a powerful drive that forced Tom Heaton to dive through the air and beat the ball away. However, that was as good as things got for the hosts in the first 45 minutes, and with their first foray forward, the visitors managed to scramble home the opening goal after just 7 minutes. After Barnes won possession in the final third of Luka Milivojevic, the ball moved through to Sam Vokes, Ashley Westwood and then Stephen Ward, and the right back found Barnes inside the box again. His initial shot was a miss kick but allowed him to bundle past Martin Kelly, and with his second chance he fired the ball between the legs of Wayne Hennessy to stun Selhurst Park. The former Brighton striker thought he had got on the scoresheet again just 8 minutes later in similar fashion, after Michael Keane had nodded the ball down into his path, but Barnes used his arm to control the ball initially before scuffing it home, and his elaborate celebrations were cut short by referee Bobby Madley. Desperate to get safety, Sean Dyche's side continued to look the more threatening, and Vokes headed a Matthew Lowton cross just over his international teammates Hennessy's crossbar. However, aiming to get over the 40-point mark themselves, Palace finally had another chance when a corner was only cleared to Milivojevic inside the box, but the Serbian blasted just wide. That was a brief respite though, and just a couple minutes later Vokes once again showed his aerial presence as he got on the end of another Ward delivery, but Hennessy just about managed to scramble it away from his goal line as Palace escaped into the changing rooms just one behind at the break. Allardyce's team showed much more improvement in the early stages of the second half, and Milivojevic again tried his luck when he fired goals from range, but Heaton was equal to it, and then Damien Delaney nearly netted an acrobatic volley which was heading for the top corner, but the England shot stopper managed to push the effort over the bar. The Eagles' back line found themselves camped in the Burnley half, but simply unable to unlock a resolute and organised back line that seemed to be first to every cross, with only a couple of late blasts from the edge of the area by Wilfried Zaha and Patrick Van Aanholt actually getting through the Claret wall, but neither troubled Heaton. But with 5 minutes to go, Burnley grabbed a second to kill the game off. A long ball by Kelly was intercepted by George Boyd, and a fine outside of the foot pass released the substitute Gray, and he raced forward before drilling the ball past Hennessy at his near post, to claim their first away victory of the campaign at Palace's expense. Crystal Palace were the architects of their own downfall, gifting Burnley 2 goals with poor passing and even poorer defending. It's clear that fatigue and injuries have had their impact, but Sam Allardyce would have expected better. Now for some positives from the game. There have been some comparisons to that 4-0 defeat to Sunderland, but this wasn't anywhere near as bad. Palace spent most of the second half pushing for an equaliser, and in doing so found themselves caught on the counter-attack. The Eagles came close a number of times, and with better refereeing they arguably could have found that equaliser. Now for some negatives from the game. Palace looked terribly fatigued, which considering it was the squad's 3rd game in 6 days is understandable. Any case to be made that Palace should have rotated the team doesn't make an account for the fact that Palace are missing 3 defenders in James Tonkins, Scott Dann and Mamadou Sakho, the club's 3 first-choice defenders. It was an afternoon to forget for Crystal Palace as they lost out at home against Burnley on Saturday. Goals from Ashley Barnes and Andre Gray settled the contest in favour of the visitors at Selhurst Park, with Burnley moving above the Eagles as a result in the Premier League table. But what do we learn from the game? Here are 5 things. Number 1. A close call. Moments after Ashley Barnes has given Burnley the lead, Wilfried Zaha was played through and subsequently taken out by Tom Heaton outside the box. Palace fans were calling for a red card, but unfortunately for the Eagles, Zaha was flagged offside, which on replays looks questionable, with Sam Allardyce describing it as the turning point in the game. Number 2. Lighting the touch paper. After Burnley's opening goal, there was a delay before the game was restarted after the officials had to deal with an object that appeared to be thrown in the direction of the Burnley players, hitting Claret's defender James Tarkowski. Replays show that it was a lighter, and it is expected that the FA will now investigate the incident. Number 3. Defensive woes. Crystal Palace came into the game short of defensive options, with Scott Dann, James Tompkins and Mamadou Sakho all missing out through injury, and Sam Allardyce admitted that his side showed signs of nerves after going a goal down early on, while they slipped back into old habits as they conceded 2 silly goals to lose the game. Number 4. Frustration all round. Burnley clearly came with a game plan to frustrate Palace and hit them on the counter-attack, and it worked to full effect in the first half, with the Clarets looking the more threatening of the two sides, and a lacklustre Palace side feeling very frustrated. Sam Allardyce praised the way that the visitors defended, and when they had their chance in the second half they were clinical, with substitute Andre Gray firing home on the break. And number 5, a broken record. It is not something Palace would have wanted or want to remember for a long time, but they became Burnley's first and possibly last scalp of the season away from home. The Clarets had previously only picked up 4 points from 17 games on the road this season, losing 13 times. And this was also a first win in London in the top flight for the Clarets since 1975, ending a barren run in the capital. But while they have ended some unwanted records, the Clarets have also kept one record going, with Burnley having not gone through a whole season without an away win since 1903. So now you've had the match review, we're now going to move on to the player ratings. But before we start, don't forget to follow us on Twitter and Facebook at Crystal Palace for all the latest news. And for all you Facebook users out there, don't forget to check out our Facebook group so you can join in with discussions, read the latest news and post your own opinion. So like I said there, if you're on social media and you do want to get in contact with us, then of course you can follow us in both Twitter and Facebook, and you can find both of these pages by using the @Crystal Palace. Now I personally would highly recommend you do follow us on both these pages because we do regularly update them with the latest news. So if you do want to keep up to date with all things Palace and get all the latest news into your feed, then of course do give us a follow on both our Twitter and Facebook pages. And you know, one of the news articles we do post quite regularly is, you know, after the game we do post player and manager interviews. So if you do want to hear from a player's or a manager's perspective of what they thought about the game and, you know, listen to their interview, then of course head over to our Facebook and Twitter page, give us a follow so you can get all the links to all the interviews when they come out. And you know, if you are on Twitter, a thing that's been quite popular on Twitter recently is actually been Twitter polls. So if you do like to have your say on all things Palace and you like to have vote in polls to have your opinion heard, then of course do follow us once again on the Twitter page so you get the chance to vote in a poll. And there was a really interesting one a few weeks ago where it was saying that how many points do you think Palace will need to stay up in the league, and there was quite a lot of difference between fans' opinions. So do, if a poll ever does come up on the Twitter feed, of course do vote into it to get your opinion heard on what you think about Palace. And that could be, like I said, for anything from points we need, from game results, and even like transfers, you know, which players or which positions you think we need to strengthen the most. But like I said, if you do want to follow us, then of course follow us on both Twitter and Facebook. And you know, if you're on Facebook, obviously I haven't really discussed the main Facebook page, but the main Facebook page you can just, you know, much like the Twitter page, get all the latest news on there. But if you're on Facebook, I'd highly recommend you also do join the Facebook group, which I'm actually a member of. So if you ever do want to get in contact with me, you can either contact me on my Twitter at the CPC podcast, or do contact me in the Facebook group, and you can find this group using the @Crystal Palace group. And obviously, like I said, I'm in this group, but I would highly recommend you do join the group, because on there after the game, quite a lot of fans go on there to post their own opinion on about how they thought the game went, who they thought the best player was, and how they thought the team as a whole performed. So if you do like to post your own opinion and let other fans read what you had to say, and you like to read what other fans had to say to see whether they have a different opinion to you, then of course do follow the Facebook group, because it's a great place for you to read other people's views and comment on them, and it's a good place for you to share your views so other fans can, you know, write on it as well. And I know personally I do go on there occasionally and write my opinion of the game. So if you ever do want to hear my opinion, other fans' opinion, or post your own, then of course do follow the Facebook group. And you know, that could be, like I said, anything from what you saw in the game, the best player, a refereeing decision, anything you want to comment on and share with other fans. And of course do join the Facebook group so you can share it on there. And even if you didn't go to the game, or you did go to the game and you don't want to post anything about the game, if you had a video or a photo from anything from the game, whether it be the Homestead Fanatics banners or maybe just, you know, a goal reaction or things like that, do go onto the Facebook group and share it, because I'm sure that there would be other fans who weren't able to go to the game and would appreciate seeing from your perspective how the game was. But like I said, the Facebook group is a great place to share with other fans your opinions, your views, and also just like I said, any pictures or anything you want to share with other fans. And much like all of the other social media pages on Twitter and Facebook, on the Facebook group we do regularly update it with the latest news. So if you do want another place to get all the latest news into your feed, then of course do follow us on there. And if you do want to follow us on any of these social media pages and you can't find them using the @ then of course do check the links in the description below, where you get you directed to the Facebook and Twitter pages. Now obviously if you are listening to the podcast on YouTube, those of you listening on Acast and iTunes can't do this, but of course you can drop a comment below the video about what you thought about the game and obviously who you thought the standout player was for Palace. And the only reason I want you to do that is much like the Facebook group, is because I want to hear your thoughts about the game and what you have to say about the performance of the players. Now obviously in the last few weeks I've set a challenge to the listeners, and that's for you to list your player ratings and give all of the players' performances ratings from 1 to 10, with obviously 1 being the worst and 10 being the best. And this is just you rating how you thought the players performed throughout the game. Now obviously during the podcast, I'll go on to it in a minute, I will go through all of the players from the starting 11 and the substitutes and just give them ratings from 1 to 10 of how I thought they performed. And I'll obviously give you a little bit of a summary of their performance, and I'll just go over some of the key moments for them personally throughout the game. But what I want you to do in the YouTube comments is actually to drop your opinion on who you thought the best player was, and obviously for you to list all of your player ratings so I can see how you rank the players and how you rated them, their performances, and compare it to mine. And like I said, I personally like to read what other fans had to say, so that's a really good way of sharing with other fans your opinion, because I personally would love to read what you thought about the players' performances and compare it to mine to see whether we've got sort of a similar outlook of the game. And even if you don't want to do it this week, you know, you can comment below anything from the game. To be honest, you can comment what you thought about the game, how you thought the players performed as a whole. You can, you know, comment about the refereeing decisions. So even if you don't want to comment with your player ratings, which I personally would like you to do, because I can compare it to mine and see whether we've got a similar outlook. But even if you don't want to do that, then of course feel free to drop anything below in the YouTube comments about how you thought the game went, obviously about the refereeing decisions and also about the man of the match, which I'll go on to talk about later in the podcast. But like I said there, if you do want to keep up to date with all things Palace, don't forget to follow us on both Twitter and Facebook, and obviously do comment below with your views of the game and also the podcast itself. But enough of that, now to move on to the player rankings. Starting in goal with Wayne Hennessy, who I am going to give a 5. Made one excellent save in the first half, but was let down by the refusal to punch or collect crosses and by allowing Gray's shot to pass him at the near post. So obviously Wayne Hennessy here, I've given him a 5 because much like the whole squad, which I'll go on to talk about, it was a very under par performance from him. And considering how well he's been playing in the last sort of 2 months or so, this was one of his down games. And sometimes you can understand that when the players start to gain form, they may have one off game. But in this game, as a collective, the whole team sort of had an under par game, and I personally have put this down to the fatigue issues, the fact that we played 3 games in the space of 6 days. And Allardyce, actually the manager, he's actually highlighted that himself. So obviously the manager has seen it in the players, the seen that they haven't really been performing to their best against Tottenham and Burnley, and he's probably put it down to the fitness of the players, but also the fact that we were quite lacklustre with our chances as well. So even though we were lacking fitness and we were tired, we were fatigued, we still had that sort of chances to go forward, but we were lacklustre with it, and obviously we didn't take our chances. And Hennessy certainly was one of the lacklustre players, because he certainly wasn't lacking the fitness, but obviously he was quite lacklustre in the fact that he didn't really do what he was meant to do throughout the game. And you know, although he made that one excellent save, which was fantastic, and obviously that's why I've given him a 5, because he made that excellent save. Other than that, throughout the game, I talked about his performance not being up to scratch. You know, there was few chances where he didn't want to go and punch balls, or punch the balls out of danger, so put us under pressure, which meant that the defenders were put under pressure, and because they were tired, they couldn't do it to their best of their ability. So, you know, Burnley kept putting balls into the box, and Hennessy was refusing to punch them, so putting the defence under pressure. And also he didn't collect them as well. So in the last few games, with the new goalkeeping coach, he started to change his style, and whenever a ball comes into the area, he would either punch you, or, you know, because he's 6'5", I think he can go forward and catch the ball, and he's been doing that really well in the last few weeks. But in this game, he didn't really he didn't really do that, and because of that, you know, that's why I've given him the 5. The fact that he didn't do what he's usually been doing, and he obviously didn't do the basics right, and that's what you want of a keeper. You know, when you're being put under pressure, whether you have no fitness or not, when the balls are coming into the area, you need to punch them or either claim them to get rid of the danger, and Hennessy obviously didn't do that, hence why I've given him the 5. And you know, the final thing really, that just to sort of sum up how bad his performance was, obviously 5 minutes from time, Gray on the counter-attack scored, lovely goal. If we scored that, it was fantastic, but obviously our defenders were pushing high up the pitch to try and get another goal. That left space in the defence, Gray ran through them, obviously the defenders got back, but then Hennessy got beaten at his near post. You look back at the replay, Hennessy's positioned right by the left post, but he still didn't get down low and didn't position his hands right to flick the ball away, because really he shouldn't really be getting beaten at his near post. But like I said, Gray's goal, he should have really saved that, and the same really can go for Ashley Barnes' goal as well. That was the opening goal within about the first sort of 7 minutes of the game. That was at point blank range, so you can't really expect him to save that, because obviously, you know, Ashley Barnes got past Kelly in the box, had a shot, and obviously Hennessy, with the defenders in front of him, didn't really have a lot of time to react, and he went straight through his legs, so he didn't really have a chance to save that one. And I can give him, I'm not really going to criticise him for that goal, but for the other goal, yeah, he probably should have saved that, because he was, you know, got beaten at his near post. But, you know, although we're going to criticise him for that goal and the other goal slightly, I still think, you know, he still made some decent saves throughout the game. And although, like I said, he didn't punch the ball away or we didn't collect the crosses, he still made a few decent saves throughout the game, which obviously kept us in the game. And obviously with the defence being tied, Burnley had a lot more chances to get through and goal. And the one really, for me, that was fantastic is when he got down low to deny Sam Vokes' header. And, you know, if he hadn't have made that save, it would have been 2-0 to Burnley at that point. So that header, great crossing once again from Burnley. Burnley constantly putting crosses into the box. Sam Vokes got the head on it, and Hennessy was able to get down low and parry it away. So he still had in the game, he still had these chances, and he saved them to keep us in the game. But overall, I've given him a 5, because much like the whole team, it's a lacklustre performance, slightly under par from what we know how good he can be in the past weeks. But like I said, he got beaten too early or too easily for the final goal, you know, beaten at his near post, didn't punch or collect crosses throughout the game. And although he made that one excellent save, overall it was a pretty, you know, under par performance from the goalkeeper Wayne Hennessy. Obviously moving on now to the left back Patrick Van Aanholt, who I am going to give a 6. Caught out of position a few too many times and found George Boyd difficult to handle. So obviously Patrick Van Aanholt here, I've given him a 6 because on his comeback into the side, I personally thought he had an alright performance, and considering the whole team were performing under par, I think he was one of the few players who actually tried his best and put his utmost effort into the game. And I've said this already, you know, in an introduction, although he was caught out of positions a few times, his offensive play was good, fantastic throughout the game, and that's what kept us going. You know, I talked about us being lacklustre and the fact that we tried to create chances, but we weren't doing them well enough, we weren't hitting them well enough. Patrick Van Aanholt was certainly one of them players who had the energy, tried to go and create chances, but he obviously didn't do that. So offensively, his performance was very good, but defensively, like I said, caught out of positions a few times. And obviously George Boyd, he found him a bit difficult to handle, didn't really cope with the physical battle, and maybe that's because Patrick Van Aanholt, it's his first game sort of starting since his ankle injury. But certainly I still think, you know, he's come into the starting 11 ahead of Jeffrey Schlupp, and that's probably because, you know, we played the 3 games in 6 days, so the team's going to be tired, and one of the players who you could see was tired from the Tottenham game was Jeffrey Schlupp. So Van Aanholt came in from him and still put in a pretty decent performance, in my opinion, down the left flank. Like I said, going forward, trying to create, one of the only players trying to really create chances for us. Tried, you know, going up and down the left flank, but like I said, defensively, it wasn't his best game. And, you know, he wasn't, in my opinion, fault for any of the goals, because he was trying to go forward and obviously the space was left. But I personally think that was the defenders as well, the centre-backs' fault, because they really should be hanging back and letting the fullbacks go forward, as opposed to them pushing forward as well, because that seriously does put you under pressure. But like I said, defensively, you know, caught out of positions a few times, but going forward, you know, he was fantastic going forward. He offered plenty for us, and, you know, in the first half he had a shot blocked in the near post, so once again, offensive play was fantastic. He managed to get into the box, have a shot, and that was obviously blocked and cleared. But then obviously, you know, throughout the game, the whole team weren't really playing well together. We weren't really connecting, and I personally think that was a fitness issue. But, you know, there was a few times where Patrick Van Aanholt put in some lovely deliveries, put in some lovely crosses and passes, but a few times teammates weren't able to get on the end of them, or his passes weren't as accurate as they could have been. So overall, I think a 6 is a fair result for Van Aanholt, considering he was alright defensively, not really as at fault for the goal as much as the centre backs, but going forward he was probably one of Palace's best positive players. The fact that he got into the box, tried to create chances, and obviously came in from Jeffrey Schlupp. Jeffrey Schlupp had found a little bit of form, and he came in and actually done a decent job for him. But Van Aanholt, hopefully with a week's training ahead of the game at the weekend against Manchester City, hopefully that can help him to up his fitness again, sort of up his defensive play again, and hopefully help us to get a result against Man City. But like I said, fatigue issues probably affected his gameplay, but certainly he was one of the more positive players for Palace. Obviously, moving on now to the centre-back Damien Delaney, who I am going to give a 5. Couldn't get to grips with the physicality of Sam Vokes, allowing him to win headers or take the ball too often. A race against Gray for the goal was always one he was going to lose too. So obviously Damien Delaney here, I've given him a 5 because much like Wayne Hennessy, it was a very under par performance. And considering Damien Delaney is probably the 5th choice centre-back at the club, when he comes in you're not really going to expect him to be as good as the likes of Sacco and Tompkins have been. But you know, he did do alright, you know, when he's come on as a sub, and especially against Tottenham. But certainly this was one of his under par games, and I've said this, I've commented this on a few on Twitter certainly, that I personally think his legs have lost it. So the fact that he's getting on a bit now, I believe he's 35, 36, so he's coming to the end of his career, and now in the way he's playing is starting to show. The fact that he's losing his pace, he's now losing that physicality, and also he's just losing that defensive skill as well. And you know, I talked about his physicality, you know, Sam Vokes, a very good striker in my opinion, as sort of shown in this game. Delaney struggled quite a lot to deal with the physicality of him, and you know, I talked about Delaney not having that sort of defensive presence as he used to do. You know, he allowed Sam Vokes to get headers, whereas before a few seasons ago Damien Delaney would be all over headers and clearing the danger, and also getting the ball too often. So we know that Damien Delaney isn't really the best ball playing centre back, but he did give the ball away a bit too much and let Sam Vokes easily win the ball too much throughout the game. And you know, the final thing really, you know, we talked about the last goal. I'm going to blame the last goal, yes, on fatigue and the fact that the players weren't as fit as they normally are, but the fact that the defence were pushing so high up the pitch. When a counter-attack came, the defence was so high up the pitch that they couldn't run back and, you know, catch Gray for the goal. And if you look back at the replay, Damien Delaney's trying to keep up with Gray, and you know, you've got a really fast-paced winger or a striker here against one of probably the slowest defenders in the Premier League. So of course Damien Delaney didn't win that fight, and we always knew that if there was a counter-attack, Damien Delaney wouldn't be able to keep up with him. And obviously Gray went on to score the goal, which just shows, you know, Damien Delaney couldn't quite get back quick enough, and that's just adds to the reason why I personally think his legs are gone, and he'll probably go on to retire at the end of the season. But the two other bullet points really I wanted to talk about Delaney's performance is the fact that his partnership, his duo with Kelly and obviously himself, didn't look like a centre-back partnership who hadn't played together in a long time. And obviously you can understand that, the fact that Delaney and Kelly haven't really played much this season, so when you put them two together, they haven't played any games together, so you can understand that sort of partnership being quite weak. And it was quite evident in this game that yes, they were weak as a partnership, but also you could clearly see that they hadn't played together. And certainly Delaney, out of the two of them, I personally think Kelly was much better, but out of the two of them, Delaney, like I said, he was off the pace quite a lot, losing all of the aerial battles and challenges to Vokes, so just showing that that sort of partnership wasn't working. And you know, we've seen how good Kelly can be, but maybe that partnership with Delaney doesn't quite work, and maybe Kelly's much better against a player or next to a player like Tompkins and Saka. But certainly, obviously, because we're missing 3 of our centre-backs, this is going to be the partnership for the next sort of 2 or 3 games. So we're going to have to hope in the sort of week's training they've got coming up, they can form a partnership to help us obviously go on and get results in the game. And you know, the only really positive thing from his performance really was from an attacking perspective. And much like Van Aanholt, he had one chance to go on and score, and he forced Heaton into a fantastic save. You know, sort of late in the second half, you know, the ball, I think it was a corner, came into the area, got headed out by Burnley, and on the volley, Damien Delaney hit it with his left foot. It was going to creep into the top corner, but Heaton made a fantastic save. And that just shows that when Palace were pushing for an equaliser, it wasn't like we were playing terrible. We weren't completely lacklustre, but when we had the chance to attack, we took it, and obviously it was a fantastic save from Heaton, which obviously stopped us from getting the equaliser. But I personally think that if that had gone in, it would have been 1-1, and we could have gone on to draw the game. But certainly, considering the fact he hasn't scored for Palace since West Ham, I believe, last season, you can understand that he wanted to score a goal when he hit that with some venom, a very accurate volley. It was going to go into the top left-hand corner, but like I said, it forced a save from Heaton. But, I said that was fantastic, but then just after that, he obviously gave away the ball too sloppily, and obviously that meant that Burnley counter-attacked and obviously went on to score the second. But overall, I've given Delaney a 5. Not the best performance from the veteran, considering how well he's played for us for the last few seasons. But I personally think this could be one of his last appearances for Palace, considering I personally think he's lost his legs and he'll probably go on to retire at the end of the season. But in this game, Sam Vokes was causing him trouble throughout the game, hence why I've given him the 5. Gave the ball away too often, didn't win headers, and obviously we know that Gray's really fast, but obviously his pace and his sort of physicality that's been lost over the last few weeks meant that he went on to lose the ball. And certainly in the next few games, we're going to have to be praying and hoping that he can start to develop a partnership with Kelly, because at the moment it clearly looks like it's not working. Now to move on to Delaney's centre-back partner, Martin Kelly, who I'm going to give a 7. Like Delaney, Kelly found Ashley Barnes difficult to mark, again struggling to win headers and tackles. So see, Martin Kelly here, I've given him a 7 because much like Delaney, although he had a slightly off game in the fact that he wasn't able to mark Ashley Barnes, and obviously he was losing headers and tackles, I personally thought he had a better game and probably was one of the better players on the pitch, much like Van Aanholt, and that's why I've given him the 7, because although defensively he may not have been fantastic, he still put in a shift and was considerably better than Delaney. And you could see that Delaney was a player that looked like obviously he's lost his legs, but also a player not having a lot of confidence. The fact that he hasn't played in quite a few months, but Kelly, having played the last few games, he had that confidence, and I personally thought with him being one of the better players on the pitch, he actually put in an alright performance, hence why I've given him the 7. Now obviously we're talking about the Burnley's opening goal. Obviously I think it was Ashley Barnes, he did sort of do a dummy, he missed the shot firstly, so that meant that he was able to get past Martin Kelly, and obviously he went on to score and put it under Hennessy's legs. But if Martin Kelly had maybe a size bigger shoe, he would have been able to block Ashley Barnes' opener, and obviously the ball would have gone out and we would have been able to clear it. So it just showed that the fact that yes, it went under Hennessy's legs, but Martin Kelly almost got a block in there. If he had stretched his foot out a few more inches or had a bigger size foot, he probably would have blocked that shot, and obviously we would have cleared the ball. So just showing that yes, I am going to blame the defence for the goal, but certainly that first goal, obviously Hennessy, it was at point blank range, so Hennessy couldn't see it, but also Martin Kelly, he almost, and I must highlight, almost blocked it, but unluckily for him and for the team, it went in and Burnley won 1-0 up. But also, I still think, although he conceded that first goal, he still, as the game went on, he still, missed a few headers and tackles. But overall, I thought he had a pretty decent game. And, it was quite a tough old battle. Burnley played a very sort of traditional style, playing 2 up top, kept putting pressure on the back line, trying to be very physical. And, their sort of centre-forward play, knocking it between the two strikers worked really well. And obviously, we did struggle to deal with that. But to be honest, yes, Hennessy missed a few, yes, Kelly missed a few headers and tackles. But I personally think, when some of the important ones came to him, Kelly, he won most of them. So although he missed some of the headers that came into the box, he still won most of the aerial battle. So when he was battling up against, the Burnley centre forwards, and also, although he did do that, and yes, he did get a few headers and blocks, he still, done a defensive job. He still found Burnley's physicality an issue at times, and that's the thing with Kelly. We can see that he hasn't played all season, the fact that he's not as physical as say Sacco, Tompkins have been, but I certainly think if he can keep playing these games, and certainly if he can carry on this form, He might keep his first team centre-back players. If he can carry on this way and sort of grow his physicality, he obviously will go on and have a better performance. But I've given him the 7 because he was probably one of the most positive and probably the better players on the field. And yes, I said like Delaney, he did struggle with the physicality in the headers and the blocks. But whenever, you know, the aerial duel came, he won most of the aerial duels. And obviously he did sort of try and do his best against the centre forwards of Burnley. But unluckily for us, they were on form, playing at 4-4-2, and they did bully us off the ball. But certainly, Martin Kelly carrying on his form from the last few games. But like I said, if he can continue to play with Delaney and form a better partnership, I certainly think there can be more to come from him this season. Because all that was lacking in this performance was, yes, he was good, he was all right defensively, but if he won a few more headers and tackles, he probably would have had an even bigger influence on the game than he already had. Obviously, moving on now to the right back Joe Ward, who I am going to give a 6. Looked more tired than most of the squad and struggled to cover as much ground as he typically does. So obviously Joe Ward here, I've given him a 6, and much like, you know, the most of the defence, he had a sort of a lackluster game in the fact that he wasn't fantastic, but he wasn't like he was terrible. And he was one of the players really who, whenever the players are fatigued and they're tired, you can certainly see it. And Joe Ward, whenever he's tired, you can see it on the pitch. And in this game, he did look the most tired out of the squad, and that's because obviously he normally covers quite a lot of ground. He likes to run up and down the right flank, or tries to cut inside, tries to sort of defend well. So he does try and do defensive work all over the field. But in this game, you could see that he was tired and fatigued in the fact that he wasn't able to cover as much ground as he nearly does. Now, obviously, Burnley, they exploited that because they could see that he was tired. So nearly all of Burnley's attacks came down the right-hand side. And that's obviously including the ball, where the ball came into the box for Barnes' goal. But obviously, you know, like I said, Burnley, they saw that he was tired, so they kept running down that flank. And obviously, because Ward was tired, it obviously meant that Burnley were able to get past him quite easily and go on and create opportunities. And obviously, like I said, the ones for Barnes' goal actually did come down his side, which just shows, you know, when you're tired and you're not at the top of your game, it can cost you in the fact that the other team can exploit that and get more chances to score. But to be honest, another player that Ward did struggle up against, yes, he struggled to cover as much ground, as he normally does. He did struggle against his namesake. So Stephen Ward, he kept, you know, having overlapping runs down that right flank, you know, and at one point he did do a sort of a fresh air kick to compound a miserable afternoon. So the fact that he was able to kick the ball in the air, it all just summed up, you know, Joe Ward's afternoon. The fact that his namesake kept sort of overlapping him, kept running past him because he was tired, and obviously the fact that he just added that kick on just sort of summarised the performance as a whole. But you know, I didn't give Joe Ward a 5 because I didn't think he was absolutely terrible and cost us everything. But you know, you could see that he was tired and he was fatigued. So hopefully, with this week's break going and training, going up to the Man City game, hopefully that can help him to build up his fitness again. You know, build up that, get rid of that fatigueness. Because certainly in this game, he still tried to cover ground, and still tried to do defensive work, and he'd done that all right. But because he was tired, he couldn't do that as much as he would normally do. He wasn't able to cover as much ground as he normally does, and obviously because of that sort of visual sort of weakness, let's say, from the way he played, obviously Burnley exploited that, and obviously all of their attacks came down the right hand side. But certainly I think a 6 is a fair result. Obviously moving on now to the defensive midfielder Luka Milivojevic, who I'm going to give a 6. 2 poor passes resulted in 2 poor goals being conceded. It was an unusually slow performance from an otherwise stellar midfielder. So obviously Luka here, I've given him a 6 because much like Joe Ward, you could see that the sort of 3 games in 6 games had started to take a toll. And certainly I've heard lots of people say this on Twitter, and I personally think it was probably his worst performance in a Palace shirt. And that's not to say that he performed terribly, but considering the high standards he's put in with his performances over the last few weeks, the fact that he's performed so well, it just shows that when he does have a down game, it's really visible in the fact that he plays. To be honest, I talked about his performance not being the best. You know, it's just, if you just look back at the game, the 2 goals that we conceded, they were actually because of 2 poor passes by Luka in the midfield. So it's just showing that when a player's not got the full fitness, they may make little mistakes. And obviously in Luka's case, unluckily for us, he made 1 or 2 bad passes, and obviously that resulted in us conceding the goals. But certainly he's normally a really good player, and he's normally sort of stellar really. He's normally doesn't put a foot wrong, does everything right defensively, but in this game, like I said, them two passes, them sort of bad passes led to us conceding. And also he's normally quite a fast-paced midfielder. He likes to get stuck in, put tackles in, but obviously in this game it was quite a slow performance. He did sort of struggle to get into the game, but to be honest, you know, on reflection, I think the reason we're saying it's probably his worst game in a Palace shirt is just because how good he's been on reflection in the last few games. So when he has an off game, it's more visible. But to be honest, you know, he did still have a few chances. So yes, he wasn't good defensively, much like Delaney, but he still had a few chances to win the game for Palace at the other end. You know, there was one where he had a header from just outside the box. From just outside the box, he headed the ball in, but obviously he tried to beat Heaton, but he couldn't quite do that because Heaton is obviously, you know, Heaton's been in very good form this season. But then slightly after that, when he had that header which got saved by Heaton, that's when he gave away possession in our own half, and obviously that's where, you know, Burnley went on to score the first goal. And then obviously another chance he had to win the game for Palace, or to get Palace level in the game. Glorious chance in my opinion. There was a loose ball sort of 10 minutes before the break, so I think it was a corner came into the box and it got cleared and the ball came to him just inside the box. He hit it and it looked like it was going to go in. I certainly, listening back to the game, watching the replays, it looked like it was going to go in. Everyone in the stands said it looked like it was going to go in, and then it went just wide. So that just shows that he had a chance and he blasted it just wide. And if that had gone in, it would have been 1-1. We probably would have gone in to half time at 1-1, and maybe the game would have been different. And then the final really chance in the second half really that he had offensively. So these three main chances, he sort of fired a volley, so he picked the ball up in midfield, had a volley from about 30 yards out. It was just about to curl into the bottom left-hand corner in front of the Homesdale, but obviously Heaton was able to make the save. But to be honest, this game just highlights how much he missed Cabaye, because that sort of partnership in the midfield with Punch and Cabaye and Milivojevic, it works so well in the midfield, them sort of free plays. And when one of them was out, obviously in this case it was Cabaye went out injured, it did affect the way he played. And whether that's because he hasn't played with McArthur much this season, whether it's because he's not normally used to punching, playing as deep as he did, whatever it was throughout the game, I personally think that Cabaye was badly missed. But certainly a 6 for Luca. Obviously is probably his worst performance in a Palace shirt, but then like I said, it's probably because of how well he's played throughout the game. And he did have them 3 chances to get us level in the game, or try to win the game from us. Obviously one of them being a header from outside the box, the other being a volley which he hit just wide from a loose ball from a corner, and obviously the other one was a 30-yarder, lovely curling effort, and Heaton was able to make the save. But like I said, a 6 from him, not the best performance from the usually, you know, stellar midfielder, but hopefully with this sort of week's break, like the rest of the players, he can grow up his fitness again. And then obviously playing with Cabaye, hopefully if Cabaye's injury isn't as bad as first thought, if he can come back in, that sort of partnership, they can work together again and obviously have more impact on the game. So moving on now to another midfielder, James McArthur, who I'm going to give a 6. Struggled to find his feet during the game. Typically does an excellent job of hustling opponents and beginning attacks, but he just couldn't make that click. So obviously James McArthur here, he's come back from injury and he started the game against Tottenham in midweek and done on a right performance, and probably was one of Palace's more positive players. And in this game, he came in for the injured Cabaye and certainly did struggle to find his feet throughout the game. And we all know from the way that McArthur's played this season in that sort of attacking role, he's normally does a really good job of hustling opponents down, so putting pressure on them to make sure he can get on the end of balls. He tries to completely run at them, tries to run past players, so he normally does that excellently. But in this game he couldn't really do that. He couldn't start attacks, he still couldn't, you know, hustle opponents. He didn't really have as much impact as he has had in the last few games. And obviously, like I said, he came in for Yohan Cabaye, and although he tried to put in that sort of bustling performance like he does normally in the middle of the park, he still did look a bit rusty, a little bit off the pace, and that's understandable considering he's just come back from his injury. But certainly a 6, you know, like I said with Milivojevic, yes, he done on the right game and he wasn't necessarily terrible throughout the game, but like I said, he still struggled to find his feet. And you know, talking about Luka Milivojevic, he certainly did not form a great partnership with him, much like Kelly and Delaney. Them sort of two playing in the centre of the park didn't really work well, and it just showed in the game. It showed that them two didn't really work well together. They didn't really communicate well, and whether that be because Cabaye maybe got injured at the last minute, they had to put McArthur in there and they hadn't worked on that partnership, whatever it may be, they didn't work well together, and obviously that was quite evident on the pitch. And you know, you can understand, like I said, coming back from injury, not being up to scratch as he would normally be. But much like Milivojevic, he actually had a really good chance to, in the first half, to obviously get Palace back into the game, I believe it was. Obviously, there was an effort, a lovely curling ball, he put it, and it just went over from just outside the box. So just showing once again, much like Luka, he can have shots from outside the box, and they went just wide. But like I said, because of his fitness, because he weren't really playing well, towards the end of the game, he got replaced by Campbell when we changed our formation up. But certainly, James McArthur, I've given him a 6, and although some people may disagree with me saying he didn't have the best performance, I certainly think he still had a slight impact on the game, and certainly wasn't, he still tried to have a positive impact on the game. Certainly didn't do his typical job of, putting pressure on the opponents and starting to begin attacks. And I personally think that's all down to him not really having that partnership with Luka Milivojevic. So hopefully in the next few games they can bond that partnership even stronger. And even if Cabaye comes back, again, I certainly can see McArthur coming off the bench and obviously being an impact sub. But certainly a 6, I think, is a fair result for him. Now to move on to the attacking midfielder Jason Puncheon, who I'm going to give a 5. Palace's midfield went missing during the match, and Puncheon's performance was an example of that. He struggled to get hold of the ball and make opportunities for others. So Jason Puncheon here, the captain, I've given him a 5 because it wasn't one of the best performances, and considering how well he's been playing of late since being given the captain's armband, this certainly was a step down in terms of how well he's performed. And I've said this with all of the other players, certainly the ones who I've given a 5. I personally think a fatigue issue did certainly play a role in how he performed throughout the game, because he's normally very creative, very involved in the game, and he sort of controls the midfield. But in this game, obviously he went missing, but because he's normally crucial to the way the midfield plays, it meant that the whole midfield went missing throughout the game, and it meant that we sort of lost that control of the midfield, and Burnley were able to control it. And certainly, Puncheon's performance was an example of how, because we didn't have control of the midfield, Burnley were able to control it, and they had more possession, or they didn't have more possession of us, but it showed that they had more. When they had the ball, they were able to use it better because we weren't really challenging them enough in the midfield. And I said that he went missing throughout the match. He's normally very good at, much like McArthur, putting pressure on the players, trying to get the ball off of them, trying to get hold of the ball. But in this game against Burnley, because Burnley used the ball so efficiently, we struggled to get hold, or they struggled, Puncheon struggled to get even on the ball, and when he had the ball he struggled to even create opportunities. And that just shows that when you're sort of off the pace and when you don't have the fitness, you can't really create as many opportunities as you would normally do. But to be honest, he did try and look for pockets of space, and he tried to sort of drift inside and drift out on the wing to sort of try and create opportunities. But obviously what has been the case quite a lot this season, when we had possession, rather than sort of trying to take the chance, he tried to create for others and make opportunities, and that just led to him in this game, especially not having the best of performances. And that's the thing with him, he saw that he wasn't really having as good of a game as he could have been, so he tried to sort of drift in between the boxes, tried to sort of go out on the wing and through the middle. He tried to make things happen, but what's been the case this season, he didn't really have as much impact as he would have normally had. And like I said, when we had possession, instead of him trying to sort of create more clear-cut chances as he normally does, he sort of struggled with the ball and obviously gave the ball away on a few occasions. But certainly I've given Puncheon a 5. A slightly disappointing performance from the captain, considering how well he's performed in the last sort of few weeks. But considering we've played 3 games in 6 days, I certainly think he was one of the main players who did suffer from the fatigue. So hopefully against Man City, having that sort of week's training and rest, that can hopefully help him to regain his fitness, because certainly in this game it was a slightly disappointing performance from the captain, and that's why I've given him the 5. The fact that he went missing throughout the game, and because of that it meant that the midfield also went missing. Now to move on to the attacking 3 of Wilfried Zaha, Christian Benteke and Andros Townsend. Starting off with Wilfried Zaha, who I'm going to give a 7. One of Palace's best players again, and once again victim of numerous unpunishable fouls. Tom Heaton should have been sent off for a foul on Zaha, only for the linesman to flag the winger offside. And there was also a clear penalty that wasn't given later in the game. You can't blame Zaha for getting frustrated. So obviously Wilfried Zaha here, I've given him a 7, and once again he was probably one of Palace's best players, and I certainly wouldn't say he was the best throughout the game, and I'll go on to talk about in man of the match who I thought the best player was, but certainly he was one of Palace's more attacking and more sort of positive players throughout the game. And certainly he was one of the players that when we were pushing to get the equaliser, he was certainly running down them flanks, getting past 2 or 3 defenders, trying to create them opportunities. But once again, in this game, I said about him getting frustrated. You know, you can understand why he was getting frustrated, because he continuously kept getting fouled, and obviously the referee wasn't giving anything and was often, you know, putting the decisions the other way. And obviously his frustration did show towards the end of the game, where he got booked because he was, you know, arguing with the linesman. And that's because the linesman gave the foul against him, saying that, you know, Zaha, you didn't really deserve to get the foul, he just got, let's say he just got bullied off the ball. But certainly there was loads of chances throughout the game, loads of opportunities where he could have been through on goal. He was running past to, you know, either to get the ball in or to run through on goal, and obviously he got fouled, and obviously the linesman or the referee didn't really do that. And certainly I personally think, you know, it's considering how bad that Bobby Madley, we've had him against, I think it was Borough, he was really bad, he made really bad calls in that game. In this game, he certainly once again had a really bad game in refereeing the game. And certainly last week he did red card Hull City striker Niasse, and that was overturned because obviously it was a wrong decision. So he's just come back off a really bad decision there. He hasn't been fined or punished by the FA for making that bad decision. And once again in this game, it wasn't like he was, you know, had 1 or 2 decisions. He continuously kept making decisions wrong, and notably most of them were fouls on Wilfried Zaha. Now, the one that quite a lot of people have been debating about on Twitter, I personally have seen back the replay, seen what they said on Match of the Day, and for once I have to agree with what Alan Shearer said, and that's obviously that Tom Heaton, A, should have been sent off, and also Zaha obviously could have been gone through on goal. So obviously, late in the game, I think it was Jason Ponch and put a lovely delivery into Zaha, and Zaha was about a yard onside, so obviously he was about to run through on goal, and then Tom Heaton rushed off his goal line and absolutely took Zaha out. Now, on another day, if that hadn't been flagged offside, which it wasn't, we've seen the replays, it wasn't offside. If Zaha wasn't apparently offside, that would have been a straight red card, because Zaha was through on goal, got past the defender, and obviously the goalkeeper took them out, and that could have changed the game, to be honest. Allardyce said it. If we had got that decision and him sent off, they would have had their reserve goalkeeper in goal. We would have been playing with 1 extra man, and we probably would have gone on to get something from the game because we had that advantage. But obviously Zaha was apparently offside, it flagged offside, and obviously because of that, Tom Heaton was able to stay on the pitch. But, you know, that was a really bad decision. That just highlights, really, in my opinion, like what everyone's been saying on Twitter, and loads of people have been saying this in other podcasts, we need to bring in the TV refereeing, because decisions like this, obviously I don't personally want it to be used for every single foul, every single offside, but decisions like this where it's very close to call, and yes, in the stand it may look like it wasn't offside, or it was offside, but if you have a decision like that, you should straight away take it back to the video referee, and they should see it. And obviously in this case, if they had seen it, they would have seen that he was onside by about a yard, so that's out of the question. That's fine, he can go through and goal. And obviously Heaton should have been shown the red card for taking him clear out. So once again, I've heard a lot of people discussing that. Tom Heaton should have been sent off because he completely took Zaha out, and obviously Zaha wasn't offside, so he should have been able to do that, be able to obviously go on and create another chance for the team. But certainly that's just really highlights really another case of why there should be video refereeing. So do comment below in the YouTube comments with what you think about that. And obviously another refereeing decision which was really bad in my opinion was that actually there was a clear penalty late in the game when Zaha went to turn, I think it was past Flanagan, he went to turn past him and Flanagan stuck his leg out and sort of nudged him to the ground. Now on Match of the Day they said that that wasn't a penalty, but personally in my opinion, I'm trying not to be biased, but if you look back at the replay, Zaha's gone to turn around the defender. Flanagan's realised that he's probably going to go past him and have a shot on goal because he's got the ball at his right foot. So he's sort of stuck his foot out, nudged him off the ball, and as Zaha's turned around, he's pushed it, or he's, you know, because of the nudge from Flanagan, he's fell to the ground. So that certainly should have been a penalty, and it was probably, I think it was exactly in the same position as the one in the Borough game, which Bob Madley didn't give us a penalty for. So once again showing that he's very inconsistent. And it's not like this game was an off game, because the game against Borough he had a mare, he made them bad decisions. You know, against Hull last weekend he had a really bad game there, and this game again he had a really bad game. So he's been one of these very inconsistent referees, and in this game it showed. And you can understand why Zaha got frustrated, because he should have, you know, got Heaton sent off been able to go through and goal, and also should have won that penalty, because like I said, I can't highlight it enough. Flanagan's seen that Zaha's going to get past him, so Zaha's just used his skill to get past him, and Flanagan has nudged him to the ground. So obviously on the sort of offside and the red card decision, I do agree with what Alan Shearer said completely. It should have been a red card and obviously down to 10 men. And then the penalty, Alan Shearer said it wasn't a penalty, but of course he was going to say that against Wilfried Zaha. And because of decisions like this where they say that Wilfried Zaha's diving, he's going to get a bad reputation, when actually he doesn't really dive, and I'm not being biased, he doesn't dive. And then in this game, that was definitely a penalty, so he shouldn't, because he'll probably get a bad reputation because of that decision, when actually it should have really been a penalty. But certainly a 7 for Wilfried Zaha, one of Palace's more positive players, trying to be an attacking threat, but certainly not one of his best games, in the fact that he didn't really have as many clear-cut chances as he would normally have. And you can understand that, because he was getting frustrated, he was concentrating more on trying to get revenge, let's say, for his decisions that gone against him. He tried to have that frustration, but obviously ultimately that led to him towards the end of the game not having as much impact as he would normally have. And certainly I've heard this on other other podcasts, and obviously on Twitter as well. We all thought he was probably going to get taken off anyway, because he was towards the end of the game, he was getting frustrated and also was becoming ineffective. Obviously moving on now to the striker Christian Benteke, who I'm going to give a 6. Had an early chance which Heaton saved well, but found it difficult to influence the game otherwise. Michael Keane, his marker, had an excellent game. So obviously Christian Benteke here, I've given him a 6 because I personally thought it was a very good performance from the Belgium. And considering how well that Michael Keane's been playing this season, you could understand that Benteke would struggle, because Benteke is a striker in form. He's been playing really well the last sort of month, but then Michael Keane has also been playing very well. So when you've got that clash together, someone's going to come up on top. And obviously in our case, unluckily for us, Michael Keane came up on top, but credit to him, because he did keep Benteke quiet for most of the game. But to be honest, he had an early chance, got the ball in the box, had a shot. Obviously Heaton, once again, one of these informed players, managed to save it. And obviously, other than that chance, he didn't really have that many chances to influence the game. And the reason I've given him a 6 is, yes, he didn't really do that much in the game, but that's mainly because he didn't really get the service. So obviously playing that sort of lone striker role, we had to try and get the ball to him, but because we were being quite restrained from the way that Burnley were playing, it meant that we couldn't get the ball up to him, and he was quite isolated at times, and that's why he didn't really have as many chances as he would normally have. But Burnley playing with sort of two old-fashioned centre-halves, if they found themselves with little work to do, because it was two centre-halves marking one striker, so they found it very easy, especially Michael Keane, to deal with him. And although, like I said, he forced Heaton into a good save, just the sort of inside the first 5 minutes when Palace were quite dominant, lovely curling shot. Other than that, he didn't really have any more clear-cut chances, and obviously as the game went on, they sort of dried up for him, and that's probably because the fatigue kicking in and the players not having the energy to try and create more chances. And obviously because he wasn't really playing as well and he wasn't really having that many chances, he was taken off for Loic Remy with about 15 minutes to go. And I personally think is, yes, he wasn't playing well, that's why he was taken off, but I also think it's to preserve him for the game against Man City, because if we regain the fitness again and play like we did against Liverpool, and we get balls into the box to him, what we didn't do against Burnley, if we can get balls to him, if we can supply him, get to the byline, get crosses in, of course he's going to score more goals. But like I said, a 6 for Christian Benteke. Found it very difficult in that lone striker role because he was sort of being marked heavily by Michael Keane. But like I've said with past games, and I keep saying this game he did really suffer, didn't really have that much influence because of how well he was being marked and the fact that he didn't have any service. And that was actually something highlighted on Match of the Day, the fact that he didn't have any service, and because he didn't have any service coming to him, it meant that he was quite isolated and didn't have the chances throughout the game. But certainly with the 1 or 2 chances he did have in the game, with that little service, he still took them well. Obviously moving on now to the final player of our starting 11, and that is Andros Townsend, who I'm going to give a 7. Townsend was another player who looked jaded, but he made a number of chances Palace didn't take. The winger also took a few threatening set pieces that his teammates couldn't take advantage of. So obviously Andros Townsend here, I've given him a 7, and much like Zaha, he was probably one of Palace's best players, and I'll go on to talk about in the man of the match who I thought the best player was. But certainly Andros Townsend, was another player that did look slightly jaded, did sort of look like he didn't have enough fitness and did sort of look fatigued. But actually, he still was probably one of Palace's best players, and that was because he made a number of chances for Palace, so he kept running to the byline, kept putting crosses in, kept cutting inside, putting balls over the top, kept doing all things like that. But obviously Palace, especially the likes of Benteke and Punchin, they didn't really take advantage of that, and because of that, obviously it meant that our performance was quite lacklustre. And like I said at the beginning, it was quite lacklustre, not because of the way we performed, but the fact that, yes, at times when we were playing well, we obviously didn't go on to take our chances. But to be honest, we had them chances which the other teammates didn't take. But also, he did put in a few set pieces that were really dangerous. We saw against Liverpool what he can do with the corners and free kicks. But in this game, there was a few corners and set pieces, a few corners and free kicks. To be honest, all set pieces he took, a few of them throughout the game were fantastic. Lovely deliveries, but obviously no teammates could get on the end of them. So Benteke wasn't able to get on the end of them. Kelly or Delaney weren't able to get on the end of them and weren't able to take advantage of the good delivery there was, from Andros Townsend. But to be honest, it was a typical sort of Andros Townsend performance, and that's why I've given him the 7, because he was a threat as usual, tried to create for other teammates, and because the other teammates looked quite jaded, they looked quite fatigued, they weren't able to take advantage of that. But, like in the last few games, he put in plenty of hard work up and down the wings, and obviously he kept swapping wings with Zaha throughout the game, so you can understand him trying to make an influence on both wings. He tried to attempt loads of crosses, but most of the time he wasn't able to find his man. And it's really hard, really, in my opinion, to criticise him, because in the last few games, since Allardyce has come in, the last sort of 2 months, he's been always working his socks off, running up and down the flanks to defend and to obviously attack. And much like the team in general, it just didn't happen for him today. So although I've given him a 7 because he had a pretty decent performance, one of the more positive players, he's still, like the rest of the team, his fitness did show, and obviously he wasn't as good as he could have been. But certainly a 7 for Andros Townsend, a pretty good performance in my opinion for a player in a team which lacked the fitness to play. And like I said, he was probably one of the players who didn't really look like he lacked fitness as much as the others, in the fact that he kept creating chances for his other teammates. Obviously, moving on now to these 2 substitutes, Loic Remy and Fraser Campbell. I'm not really going to give either of them ratings because I feel that neither of them were on the pitch long enough. But just to sort of summarise Remy's performance, he came off from Benteke, like I said, but it still looks like Remy completely lacks the match fitness, considering he's been out for most of the season. And to be honest, in the last few games, we've got 3 games remaining, it looks like he's not really going to make much impact in the remaining games, so he's probably going to go back to Chelsea and probably end his career there, because I personally think that if he keeps getting injuries, he's not really going to have as good of a career as he's had in the past. But certainly he came on, played in a 4-4-2 with Fraser Campbell, did alright, and did actually supply the ball to Zaha for Zaha to obviously win the penalty, which he should have won, but I've already talked about that. So he still had an influence in the fact that he found Zaha with that pass, but he came off for Benteke, but still looked like he completely lacked match fitness. And the same goes for Fraser Campbell. It tends to be, to be honest, when Campbell comes on, when we bring on, it shows that it's a sign that Palace are really struggling for ideas. The fact that we take off one of our top scorers in Benteke and put on Fraser Campbell, who, yes, in my opinion, he's got the energy, he's got the pace, he's got all of that, but he hasn't got the quality. So when you're taking off a player like Benteke and bringing on Remy and Campbell, it tends to show a sign that we're lacking ideas, so we're just going to have to go 4-4-2 and just hope that the pace of Remy and Campbell does go off. But to be honest, Loic Remy, not really much to praise him for, but Fraser Campbell, on the other hand, I thought he'd done a really great job of closing down opponents, and, that's all you can really expect him to do. The last sort of 10 minutes of the game, you want him just to put pressure on the back line, and certainly with that pace and that sort of little bit of physicality he's got and his ball playing skills, he certainly was able to do that. But certainly, these 2 substitutes just show that we've got a lack of ideas in the fact that we didn't have any creative options to bring off the bench. But obviously, just really to summarise the game here, I've got 3 bullet points really this week to describe the game. And to be honest, because we looked quite jaded and quite tired throughout the game, there's not really much the manager can do. And I think that's why, especially on social media, there wasn't really too much criticism on Sam Allardyce, because you could see in the players the fact that they were very tired and jaded. And that just shows, because they've played 3 games in 6 days, the manager can't really do anything about that. The manager can't make them all fully fit. So obviously you can understand why they were tired, and obviously hence why there's not really too much blame on the manager. But to be honest, we had so many attempts at playing a high defensive line against Burnley. So we tried to play really high, tried to put pressure on Burnley, tried to create opportunities. But obviously, ultimately, it did fail, and because we were pushing so high up the pitch, that meant there were loads of spaces for Burnley to exploit, and they done that on so many occasions where they saw that we were pushing so high up, and because the fullbacks as well were pushing so high up, they could get in behind the fullback and the centre back, obviously run through and score the goal, and that's most notably for Andre Gray's goal. But like I said, in a performance where we looked very tired and fatigued, you can understand why the players performed the way they did, because Burnley had a week to prepare and they were fully fit, whereas we only had a few days, so you can understand that, and obviously there's not much the manager can do. But to be honest, we tried to get something out of the game, tried to play a high defensive line, but ultimately that left space, and obviously that's what Burnley exploited, and obviously led to us to losing the game. Now to move on to my Man of the Match award, but I'll do that and give you my Man of the Match and who I thought had the biggest influence in the game. I'm now going to give you the results of my Twitter poll. So obviously if you do want to vote in next week's Twitter poll and have your opinion heard on who you thought the best player was, and obviously the player with the biggest influence in the game, then do head over to my own personal Twitter account at the CPC Podcast. Do give me a follow, so obviously you can vote in next week's Twitter poll, but also much like the official Crystal Palace account, I do regularly update it with the latest news. So if you do want another place to get all the latest news, then of course do give us a follow on there so you can receive it all in your inbox. But like I said, I'm going to move on to the Man of the Match now and obviously give you the results of the Twitter poll. But this week, the game against Burnley, it was quite a lacklustre performance. No sort of particular player did stand out for me, and obviously I found it very difficult to pinpoint 4 players who I could put on the shortlist because, like I said, with it being a lacklustre performance, the whole team was underperforming. But I did pick out 2 players, so instead of putting 4, I've picked out 2, and actually there was quite a considerable difference between what people thought about this, and certainly one person tweeted me saying, is this really a question? But I personally think it is, because I thought these 2 players in particular had 2 different roles to play in the team, one offensive and one defensive, and I personally think they've both done an alright job in that position. So they were both Martin Kelly and Andros Townsend. So obviously I put Martin Kelly in there because I thought I've given him a 7 in the player ratings. I thought his defensive sort of performance was fantastic. Yes, it wasn't brilliant, but he still put himself about there trying to win aerial battles, and yes, he missed a few of the headers and a few of the blocks. He could have, if his foot was slightly bigger, he probably would have saved their first goal. So he'd done an alright defensive job, and considering he's come into the side, he normally plays at right back, even though his preferred position is centre back. He's now playing in his preferred position, and he's performing so much better. And then obviously Andros Townsend, since Allardyce has come in, this guy has been a revelation. It's as if he's been like a new signing. The fact that he's performed so much better under Allardyce, and I don't know what it is, whether it be the more motivation Allardyce and Sam Allardyce give him, whether it's just because he's now happy playing in the system we have. But Andros Townsend, he's been improved so much under Allardyce, and in this game was another example of that. With him playing offensive, yes, Burnley were playing very well defensively, and they were very compact, and they were able to restrict us to not many chances. Andros Townsend, there was a few times where he got to the byline, put crosses in, and obviously I've said this in the player ratings, there wasn't anywhere or anyone to get on the end of them crosses, so he was creating chances for his teammates, trying to sort of attack the Burnley backline, tried to put pressure on them, but ultimately, because there was no place to finish off his chances that he delivered to them, it obviously meant in us going on to lose the game. But I personally thought these 2 players had probably the best players, and you could debate about whether maybe the likes of Zaha could be on here, maybe the likes of McArthur could be on there for his pressing performance, Zaha for his attacking performance. But these 2 players in particular stood out for me because their impact was very good, obviously, hence why I've given them both 7s. But like I said, Martin Kelly because of his defensive performance and how much he's improved under Allardyce, and obviously the same goes to Andros Townsend. His offensive performance was fantastic, kept running, kept trying to attack the Burnley backline, and ultimately almost won us the game, because if we had people to finish off his chances that were put into the box, we could have gone on to win the game, because certainly Townsend, that's what he was looking for, but unluckily for us it didn't quite happen. But just to go over the Twitter polls, obviously quite a lot of people voted in it, but in second place was Martin Kelly with 27% of the votes. So Andros Townsend won it with quite a remarkable 73% of the votes. So most people agreed with me in the fact that these 2 players were the best on the field. But obviously the majority thought that Andros Townsend was the better player. But I personally am going to give the man of the match award to Andros Townsend. So congratulations, Andros. You don't get a trophy or certificate, but you do get my sincere congratulations on what was a very solid performance from you. And considering you've been in the man of the match shortlist for about the last sort of 4 or 5 games, it's just credit to you of how well you've performed. But you and Martin Kelly, in my opinion, in the game against Burnley, although it was a very lacklustre performance from the whole team, I personally thought that your influence and your sort of what you gave to the team was quite crucial in the fact that we could have lost by more, or we could have pushed on to win the game, and certainly these players were trying to do that. So now you've had my match report, player rankings and my man of match. That concludes this week's podcast. Now I've got an exclusive interview with Sam Allardyce and Patrick Van Aanholt following the game.
Well, Patrick, this probably doesn't come as much of a surprise to you. A year ago you were with Sunderland fighting for your lives, and the fight's going to go on now for another week or two perhaps for Palace. Is that fair?
We lost today, so I'm disappointed. But we move on, there's still 3 more games left to play, and we keep going.
Where was it lost, in your opinion, today?
I think we started the game not as good as we used to do, and then we conceded a goal. Then you have to catch up. Then we tried, and the goals didn't come today.
You've enjoyed great success against some of the so-called biggest clubs. It was a different test against Burnley today, wasn't it? Different kind of requirement needed for you.
Yeah, we knew our Burnley setup and our Burnley plays. Obviously different than the top teams, and we knew what we had to do. And unfortunately, we didn't do it well.
And was there anything in their approach, for example, playing the 2 men up front together, that caught you slightly by surprise or caused you more difficulty?
We knew they were going to do that, so we trained on it, so we were ready. But unfortunately, we didn't get the win.
And how are you enjoying it overall? I mean, the table still says Palace are going to be okay. And are you enjoying it here compared to your previous life at Sunderland? Of course, you've departed today. So is that the reason for the little smile?
No, I'm very sorry for Sunderland. I've been there 2.5 years, so basically they helped me to the Premier League. So I'm very, very sad for them. But I'm at Palace now, so I'm moved on. And we need another win to be safe, and I'm very positive that we get safe, and I'm very happy.
Sam, unfortunate defeat today. Can we get your thoughts on the game?
I think poor first half. Nervous for whatever reason. I think because we lost a sloppy goal, because I thought the start was excellent. I think we had 3 corners in the first 2 minutes. Leary looked positive, and then fell asleep on the goal by really just not clearing the ball properly and losing the ball just outside our own box to begin with. And I think that made us a little nervous. But I think we've recovered when we had a chat at half time about calming down and being in control of yourself when the ball's with you particularly, and making sure you make the right passes and try and make the right passes through midfield and into wide areas. And throughout the whole of the second half, we continued to do that much better, so we continued to pile the pressure on Burnley, but then the chances were few and far between, because Burnley defended as we've been defending at places like Chelsea and Liverpool last week, and found it very difficult to get away through. But the big disappointment for me was just gifting that second goal then, because that pressure may have told on Burnley in the end, and we may have nicked a draw, which would have been a big point, coming back from 1-0 down. But a big effort from the players, massive effort, disappointed as we all are, but they've put a massive effort in, tried to turn it round at half time, so they listened to what we were saying and went out and made it better. Unfortunately, in the end, due to our own deficiencies towards the end, we let them nick the second.
It's been a busy month. Is it good now to have that full week back at the training ground?
It is very good. I mean, this week has been massive in terms of Sunday, Wednesday, Saturday, and Burnley no game this week at all, so they were bound to be a little sharper than we were, and I think they were, particularly first half. But I have to say to the players was they really turned it round second half. Unfortunately, we've lost the game, but in terms of effort and how they must be feeling, they've given everything they've got, and that's been all I can ask really, and I think that. People think it might be excuses, but without Burnley playing this week, they've got to come here fresh, ready to go, and play a very good system, and use the the tools that they've got very, very well, and made life difficult for us for most of the game, like I said.
So there you have it. Now you've heard what Sam Allardyce and Patrick Van Aanholt had to say after the game. That concludes this week's podcast for the game against Burnley. But make sure to come back next week for my post-match review of the game against Man City. So thanks for listening, and remember to up the Palace.